Sustainability Karma, a podcast series on sustainable development, sustainability, and ESG, or environmental, social, and governance, on AIR FM Rainbow Delhi 102.6. In this podcast series, with senior journalist and editor Rajiv Tikoo, a who's who of thought leaders from the government, private sector, and civil society share their mantra for accelerating development in India and making the world a better place.
Welcome to this episode of Sustainability Karma. I am your host, Rajiv Tikoo. Today we have a very special guest, Nadir Godrej. He is chairman and managing director of Godrej Industries and chairman of Godrej Agrovet. Going beyond business, he has the unique distinction of capturing his passion for sustainability in poetry. So let's welcome Nadir Godrej to this episode of Sustainability Karma. Welcome, Mr. Godrej, to this episode. Most leaders talk about sustainability. Some of them also walk the talk, but you are unique in a way that you've also taken your passion and translated it into poetry. So what is it that brought the two together, really?
For quite some time now, I've been making speeches in verse. Mm-hmm. And so whenever I speak about sustainability, or for that matter, any other topic, it can be chemistry, engineering, economics. I usually say it in verse. And I inherited chemical engineering and business from my father, but I inherited poetry from my maternal grandmother and my mother.
To recite a couple of lines.
So I'll read a poem on climate change. Okay. It is no longer climate change within a tolerable range. A crisis is what it's about, with fires, floods, as well as drought. Every week a constant blast, far worse than seen in the past. If we must, we will adapt. Prevention, though, would be more apt. There is a cost to adaptation. It's rising fast in every nation, as well as for the world at large. This will be a heavy charge. In fact, we should all conclude prevention would indeed be shrewd. It actually would cost much less and avoid a lot of stress. A uniform carbon tax would protect all our backs, collected by each nation state, but universal in its rate. All GHGs would be fair game. Every country should charge the same. The benefit that this would yield would be a level playing field. Competitors just wouldn't care because this system's very fair. Just how high should this tax be? A range of numbers we can see. But $60 per metric ton would surely get reduction done. For carbon, this could be the rate. For others, we would calibrate. The appropriate rate we would select based on the greenhouse gas effect. Based on today's emission rate, quite candidly I should state, it wouldn't be a trivial sum. But there's no reason to be glum. In dollars, it would be 2 trillion. It's a lot, but not a zillion. Compared to global GDP, the percentage is less than 3. Compared to taxes, then again, the percentage is less than 10. Of course, some would then take a call to reduce emissions, not pay at all. But bear in mind, it's not a cost. For the economies, nothing's lost. A UBI could be reinstated. Some other tax could be abated. And if this is indeed just so, the economy would still grow. Don't you think it's very nice that there is hardly any price and very little would be lost, as adaptation has a higher cost?
Thank you, sir. How would you advise India to step up its climate action?
One of the things we have discovered that we have achieved most of what we set out to. We are already water positive. We are going to be solid waste positive in very, very soon. And on carbon also, we made a lot of progress. So we were hoping to be Scope 1 and Scope 2 neutral by 2020. We haven't achieved that, but we use a lot of green energy. We are continuously investing in energy efficiency. But the interesting thing is we've done all of this without affecting profits at all.
That's interesting.
We have used CSR money, but the CSR money has a social benefit, as it must, and it has a benefit to the business in abating our carbon or our water or our solid waste. So people should realize that it is good for business to do this. Energy efficiency has a better rate of return than almost any other investment that we do.
Right.
In fact, I sometimes wonder whether we are finding all the opportunities because the rates of return are so high. So I would urge other businesses to do this, not because it's good for the planet, but because it's good for business. Bear that in mind, find the ways to achieve both simultaneously, and you can't lose.
So what would you advise India Inc. to do to enhance achievement of SDGs while we are slightly lagging actually?
Right. There's a lot we can do, and our corporate social responsibility budgets are the means to do it. To my mind, spending on the environment and on education are the best, because education helps development more than anything else. Of course, it takes time, but in the long run, it's the best means of development and the best means of removing social evils. There are one or two things that prevent education. One is water security. If you don't have water security, you can't have people going to schools, and that affects education. And the other is malnutrition. So in order to support education, we also have to do sanitation and tackle malnutrition. But these are the first things. After that, we can try and tackle other SDGs. It's also very important for businesses to be inclusive. If businesses are inclusive, by being inclusive, they will empower hundreds of millions of people to live a better life. So this is what people should do to tackle the SDGs. And of course, we should have a constant dialogue with the government. The government has a very big role to play, but the government has lots of money. We have lots of skills and knowledge, and NGOs have hands on the ground. All three collaborating can solve any problem in India.
And how would you rate India's success in putting the Global South agenda on the G20 agenda?
I think India has done a wonderful job. The very fact that the African Union has been admitted is excellent. We have a lot of common interests. The interests of the South have not been looked after very well in the past. And India is a fast developing country. It's no longer an underdeveloped country. It's not quite reached developed status, but it's getting there very fast. And India is a perfect bridge between the developed world and the underdeveloped world. And Africa is a great area where much needs to be done. East Asia is an area where countries were not very developed, but have now become quite developed, including China. So I think we have done a great job in, especially in including Africa.
Right. What would be your outlook for the Godrej Group, given the challenges in particularly emissions?
Yes, we are using a lot of green energy, and today green energy is cheaper than fossil fuel energy in India. So there is no strong disincentive to use green energy. There is one problem, that most of the green energy in India is solar and wind. And as we increase solar and wind, we will have to have more and more storage. Currently, the grid is taking care of that, which is actually a concession for green energy, which helps us all to use more green energy. But this will become unaffordable. So the government will have to look at more storage. But there are kinds of green energy which are round the clock. We ourselves use a lot of biomass. We use biomass for steam. We use biomass for cogeneration to produce both electricity and steam. And yesterday I was speaking to the representatives of an American company that are putting up modular reactors, nuclear reactors in India. These are large modular reactors, but both large modular reactors and small modular reactors are perfectly safe. And nuclear energy is also round-the-clock green energy. It's not always considered green energy because it has safety hazards, waste issues, but the quantity of waste is very small. It can be reused, it can be recycled in breeder reactors or as fuel for normal reactors. So nuclear energy is one way of getting round the clock energy. I won't necessarily call it green, but surely free of carbon emissions.
But are your net zero targets on track?
We have shifted our net zero target for scope 1 and scope 2 to 2035. And by then we will definitely be on track. But we have just started examining our scope 3 emissions. This is the emissions done by our suppliers. So we have to work closely with our suppliers. We don't even know exactly where we stand. But once we have a clear picture, we will work closely with the suppliers. We'll teach the suppliers whatever we have learned to reduce their emissions. And we'll also incentivize them. If we have two suppliers and one is better than the other, we will incentivize the better supplier. So in these two ways, I think we will work on scope 3. But right now, we have no visibility on when we can achieve that.
And what about this carbon border tax mechanism? Now, is this going to be a double challenge in dealing with your supply chains?
It could be a challenge, but since with our supply chains, but since we ourselves have very low carbon emissions, we don't think it will be a challenge for our business. And as long as these taxes are fair, we don't object to them. But there are some issues around fairness, and the government is well aware of that, and they are taking up the cause. We don't think it'll affect our business much because we are already ahead of the curve.
So while as government will take its own time to come up with a response to CBM, in the meantime, what would you advise your industry fraternity to do to prepare? Because things are just kicking in now.
I think industry is getting more and more aware. And as I said, I would advise them to look at CSR, put big targets, and maybe if they're not making a lot of progress, even keep a small internal carbon price. The government is going to introduce carbon trading. Then we can use that as a mechanism to further go down the curve. In our agri-business, we are planning to grow trees. We already have farmers grow oil palm. We have an oil palm business, and the oil palm sequesters a lot of carbon. So, and other trees can help to produce food. So we will look at all these alternatives. We are also looking at bamboo as an alternate fuel. Bamboo is an excellent green fuel with a very high yield and can be grown in land that is not necessarily ideal for food. It can also be grown in combination with trees. And bamboo, though not a tree, like a tree, sequesters carbon even when you harvest it, because the roots still stay in the ground and the stem grows again.
But given the issues with palm oil, how is Godrej Agrovet preparing for the future?
We only produce sustainable oil palm in India because all of it is grown in agricultural land. We use drip irrigation, so the water consumption is not high, and the tree sequesters much more carbon. And since we have not cut any forests to grow the tree, it is perfectly sustainable.
If you sum up, how would you say that Godrej's sustainability approach is different from others?
I wouldn't say it's different. Maybe we are a little bit ahead, and maybe we started long ago. My uncle Sorab was a staunch environmentalist. He preserved our mangroves. That's what I spoke about in Davos. And he also set up WWF. He was very keen on environmental issues. In his lifetime, carbon emissions were not that important, but biodiversity was very important. Preserving forests were very important. And he had a big role to play in the Save the Tiger project. He persuaded Indira Gandhi to set up the Save the Tiger project. So it has been in our DNA for a very long time. And we don't think there should be any conflict between industry and the environment. Industry can protect the environment. Industry can make sure that it does its business in a way in which the environment is protected. And unless the environment is protected, we won't have a planet and we won't have industry.
And how do you intend to be ahead of the times in the future also, particularly with ESG?
We will watch the trends. We will also see what sort of things make sense for the future. We will try and not only watch the trends, but predict the trends, maybe even set the trends. And we will try and be ahead of the curve. And we have always felt that sustainability is very good for the business. So all these trends, we shouldn't think of this as costs, but as basic criteria to survive and to go ahead. And if we feel that the objectives will affect profits, we just have to think it through and try and do it in a way in which both profits and responsibilities can be met.
Thank you, sir. It's great to listen to you.
Thank you for having me.
You just heard Nadir Godrej talk about how businesses can advance the sustainability agenda in the country.
We hope you like this program. This program is also live streamed on All India Radio and aired on community radio stations. We look forward to your feedback on our WhatsApp number 9818120554. For participation in this program, write to us at sustainabilitykarma@gmail.com. You may also connect with us on social media. This podcast is also available on podcasting hosting sites. Looking forward to meet you again at the same time next week with a new episode and a new guest. Till then, goodbye from all of us. Sustainability Karma, a podcast series with senior journalist and editor Rajiv Tikoo on sustainable development, sustainability and ESG.